a few more moments here while people continue to log on. We have more than 300 registrations for today's webinar. Typically, we get about 50 to 60% attending the live event, so just give a few more moments. Frank, do you have a joke for us? He's shaking his head no.
No, no, really just trying to save my voice. Been on too many conferences, speaking in
Oh,
network events over loud crowds.
nice. Well, you rest up. Okay. Give a few more moments here. I'll talk very slowly. Okay, that's a pretty good amount. So, welcome everyone, and thanks for joining us today. I am Alex Bols, Senior Technical Advisor here at CHBA, and my co-host is Frank Lohmann, Senior Director of Building Science. We also have Natasha Rombo with us in the background. Natasha is CHBA's Director of Marketing and Communication. Today we have a 1.5 hour webinar with lots of new information to share with you. Today's webinar is the third installment in our somewhat new early adopter webinar series. Today's early adopter will bring us on his journey on how his team learned what it took to implement mass timber in their projects. And before we dive into that, we'll do some housekeeping. We do this every time. The recording of today's webinar and the slide deck will be available on the CHBA website to CHBA members. And I'll give it a day or two. I also want to let you know that we've muted all participants. This is very typical for our tech webinars. We are trying, however, to make the webinar as interactive as possible. That means you could ask questions throughout by writing them in the Q&A button at the bottom of your Zoom window. We'll answer the questions live during the webinar or by responding directly to you in the Q&A panel. So as in other technical webinars, we will have a few polls for you. So Natasha, if you could please prompt the first one for the audience. It's going to pop up here. And we want to know where you're coming from. So the primary region where you and your business or organization operate. It's always a good variety, and it gives our speakers some insight on where a topic might be more relevant. We'll let this roll a little bit longer. That's great. So, Joe, you're going to be happy. There's a nice crew from BC. Got some friends from Ontario and Alberta. Pretty nice variety. Some Atlantic folks. That's great. So, I really want to take this time to explain what this webinar series is all about. The idea of the early adopter webinar series is to showcase innovative solutions or emerging technologies. So something where we rely on the early adopter and risk taker to figure it out for others. The format is that we have a builder or renovator provide their real life commentary after an expert co-presenter, and for today, co-presenters, has explained the new technology or innovative concept. The builder and renovator, which is our early adopter, has voluntarily adopted the new technology or innovative idea and shares what worked and what didn't work by showcasing their projects and talking about their journey. So we hope that this will help other builders and renovators to get a head start on cost effectively incorporating best practices and innovative solutions into their projects. So you see on the screen here, we've kicked things off. We're on our third webinar right now. We started with integrating resilience. It was really a great success. We had good feedback. Then we jumped into effective sound transmission techniques in residential construction that focused on secondary dwelling units and MURBs and things like that. And today we're going to be exploring mass timber. So the reason I mention this is it gives you a snapshot of the ideas and the topics that we're looking for. So if the audience has an idea or a suggestion for a future topic, please let us know. We'd love to collaborate with you. And we hope that all groups and professions in our membership find this equally helpful. So let's run the second poll question here and let's find out who is represented in today's audience. There's always a nice variety here as well. That's great. Some builders, a lot of builders, some modular folks. It's excellent. Some EAs. Yeah, it's a really nice variety. That's great. And before I do introduce our guest today, I wanted Frank to provide some context on why this topic is so important. Why do we need to know about this now? And before we get there, Frank, we talk a lot, and in your past life, you mentioned to me that you were a carpenter by trade. There's something so peaceful with working with wood. I was in the trades before. I really do enjoy it. The feel and the smell of it, it can be very therapeutic. Frank, with that carpenter lens, as a young German carpenter, what was the most interesting project you've been a part of and worked on?
Oh, that's a cool question. It was a barn door, half round, 2 stories high, 4 segments, and we built that from scratch. We had to clear the entire factory floor to figure out how to build this one-on-one, put it together, all the glazing, all the framing. It was pretty cool. Yeah.
Very cool. All right, and sorry for everyone to get too personal here, but tell us why mass timber is so important now.
Yeah, so and I actually noticed on the thanks Alex for that introduction. I did not know that you're going to ask me that, so I'm glad I could remember 30 years back. So what I wanted to do is set the stage a little bit, and I just saw on the professional poll there that we do have a few product manufacturers, and that's good to know because that's probably a member category that we don't always see. So I'm very happy to see that. And that leads to my first point here. Prefab is in everyone's ears and mouth. Everyone wants prefab modular solutions to become part of construction. And so obviously mass timber fits in that category as well. We also hear a lot about low embodied carbon materials. Again, wood checks that list, and it may even come into the 2030 code with embodied carbon regulations. Fire and seismic and structural performance on denser housing is sometimes becoming a challenge, more the fire and so then, of course, we're wondering what is mass timber? How does mass timber do on that side? And we know that the 2025 codes will all be the second edition enabling encapsulated mass timber construction, which is the elongated version of mass timber that the code uses. So those are all context pieces I wanted to bring up, which is why we thought, okay, it's probably a good time that we start this. We were actually considering doing a whole series of mass timber, and we can still do that, Rob. You and I can still talk about that, and Haley and Natasha and Joe. But we wanted to do this once to see what the response is. And in terms of our members, why are we bringing, and this goes further to what Alex said earlier about the whole series, if there is a technology or practice that actually offers possibly productivity gains and innovative solutions, we always hear from members, we want to hear more about that. Because as CHBA, we're committed to solving housing and affordability crisis and the climate crisis through integrated solutions. So if we do find out innovative solutions that cover a few of these bases, then we're always interested. We do hear occasionally that cost effectiveness for low-rise residential and mass timber isn't there. And so we're hoping that the panel will talk about that today. That's probably been why we haven't hearing more about it because most of our members build in that space. And of course, we always appreciate our members always appreciate hearing about something where they can move into the next space and having a market advantage. So that all together was the reason why we want to bring mass timber to you today. And back to you, Alex.
Yeah, that's really great, Frank. Well said. You'll have to show me some photos of that barn door. And as a perfect segue to introduce our technical experts and early adopter, CHBA is very happy to have Joe Geluch, Natasha Jeremy, Kaylee Cucaro, and Rob Jonkman. Each of them brings a wealth of knowledge. And on behalf of CHBA, thank you so much for being here with us today. Today's topic is mass timber's role in the next generation of homes. We'll start with presentations from Haley and then Natasha. These are our technical experts on the subject. They are super knowledgeable, and I'm really looking forward to their presentations. Haley is a structural engineer and has focused her career specializing in sustainable architecture and the advancement of timber building systems. She spent several years of her career in research on the behavior and fire safety of mass timber as a structural designer in Toronto and working to develop affordable housing products built of high-performance timber panels, contributing to the successful completion of several turnkey housing projects. In her current role as technical manager for the Canadian Wood Council's WoodWorks program, Haley works to aid project teams with technical support and to bring resources and education to industry stakeholders, advocating for the successful implementation of a beautiful and sustainable building material in our built environment. After Haley's presentation, we will hear from Natasha. Natasha Jeremik is a professional engineer with a background in design, building performance, and project management. She is currently the sustainability manager for codes and standards at the Canadian Wood Council, where she leads strategic initiatives focused on low carbon construction, energy efficiency, durability, and circularity. Natasha leverages her expertise in structural design, building envelope consulting, and whole life carbon accounting to showcase how wood products contribute to a sustainable, low carbon built environment. She is passionate about raising awareness of wood's role as a viable solution in advancing climate conscious construction. Also, for the Canadian Wood Council, we're going to hear from Rob Jonkman. Most of you know Rob. He's a popular guy. I've tasked Rob with providing some color commentary throughout. Rob, I do have the volume button, so if things go off the rails, I will mute you. I'm just joking. Rob, you always bring such great questions and everything like that at the CHBA fall meetings and home building week. You always really bring great insight. So, Rob completed a Bachelor of Civil Engineering and Management degree at McMaster University. He's worked for a structural engineering consulting firm and for over 9 years as design and engineering supervisor at a Canadian timber frame manufacturer. Rob joined the CWC in 2005, progressing to Director of Codes and Standards in 2014, and is now the Vice President of Codes and Engineering. Really knowledgeable people here. So let's get some good questions going. After those technical presentations, we will hear from our early adopter, Joe Geluch. As a forward-thinking construction leader with over 2 decades of experience, Naikoon's president began his career in his father's company on Haida Gwaii and holds a Red Seal Carpenter designation, Gold Seal Project Manager certification, and Certified Housing Professional credential. Joe's understanding of the industry's challenges and opportunities is widely sought. An effective leader, he has guided his team to over 45 awards, and Naikoon has seen significant growth under his direction, demonstrating expertise and sophistication. And Joe, I have to say, since we started collaborating on this webinar, I visit your website often, and I have to say, man, like your projects belong on the cover of Architecture magazine. So kudos to you, and just keep up the great work. So. Um, Haley, I'm going to get you to slowly take over the screen here, and I'm going to get CHBA's Natasha to run another poll, please. And this is good for the speakers, the audience, and CHBA to understand. We want to know if you've ever incorporated mass timber into your designs. And we're going to right away, so a lot of no's and maybes, but we're going to run this before and after snapshot. We've done this in the past, and we're really happy with the data that comes out of it. Haley, we see your screen. That's excellent. Give another moment for this. Okay, and I will stop talking. Haley, the floor is yours.
Great. Thank you. Thanks, Alex and Frank, for having us. And thanks for running that poll. It's good to see that a good chunk of you are already considering mass timber in your businesses and projects. So, yeah, I'm going to do a really quick overview this afternoon or morning, depending on where you're coming from. About residential mass timber construction, the use of mass timber in home building, and really when we can use it. Productivity is coming up a lot lately, of course. So I'm just going to try and highlight kind of how mass timber is being used in residential projects to help improve outcomes or productivity. Just really quickly about me and the WoodWorks program. So as Alex mentioned, I'm a structural engineer by background. Previously to working for WoodWorks, I worked for a wood prefab housing builder in the GTA for several years. And now in my position with WoodWorks, we work to lead market development in the Ontario region, and we have WoodWorks programs in regions all the way across the country to help support industry, understand challenges, support projects moving forward to increase the use of wood in many different sectors, including mid-rise and tall residential projects. So our team in Ontario is four of us: our executive director, Stephen Street, myself, and two technical advisors, Brock and Dammy. And we work to provide free hands-on project support to help ease or increase the success of the implementation of wood use in all different types of projects. We provide tailored presentations depending on your company's continuing education needs, tours, seminars, workshops, and tons of free online tools and resources on our website. We're also going to have a big presence at the building show next week. So if anyone is coming out, please do stop by one of our sessions or one of our booths. And we're hosting a timber after party as well. So please, I'll post some links later after I'm done with my overview. This is one example of some of the free resources that we have available. We recently released the second edition to our guide to encapsulated mass timber construction in the Ontario Building Code. This also applies for other provinces that have similar code provisions right now as Ontario, which is BC and Quebec. This is a free guide you can access on our website that incorporates all of the updated code provisions and with design examples. And there's a link on this slide to the recently launched EMTC calculator tool for exposed mass timber by the CWC. Another resource that I wanted to highlight is our recently launched mass timber business case studies. This was published by WoodWorks British Columbia and goes through 3 project examples, 2 of which are residential, really highlighting the lessons learned from these projects and a full comparative costing study showing, cost parity and how to achieve that with residential projects. And I'm going to be talking about one of those projects in my presentation coming up. So really briefly, just wanted to show this slide. What is mass timber when we're talking about it? Because there are tons of different products on the market. You're probably hearing all of these different names or acronyms thrown around. So when we say mass timber, we're really referring to any number of these manufactured or engineered wood products that are built up of pieces of lumber, wood veneers, wood strands, glued or mechanically fastened together with nails, screws, or dowels. So all kinds of different products that we could be referring to when we're talking about building with mass timber. And I'm going to talk a little bit about I'm going to talk about 4 projects and really just trying to highlight again where mass timber can be implemented in residential construction to help realize those benefits. And I'm going to be mainly talking about multifamily applications because that's where we really see mass timber structures becoming cost competitive in that kind of range and where you can really capitalize on the benefits that mass timber has to offer. Quick plug for NRCan's, Natural Resources Canada's interactive map called the State of Mass Timber in Canada. This has a database of all the different mass timber manufacturers across the country, and you can have a look at their production capacity. They are also intaking project examples where you can write in and get your project into the database of mass timber projects across the country. So it's a great one to see what's being built and also get your products or projects into the database if you want to be highlighted. So as I mentioned, I'm going to be talking about 4 projects. And again, this is going to be a really high level overview because I'm short on time, but I'll be sticking around, of course, for the rest of the webinar and happy to chat at any time about any questions. So the first project I want to highlight is a mid-rise multifamily building in Kitchener. It's actually 4 repeatable buildings that are all the same floor plans, just repeated on the site one after the other. And they're incorporating lessons learned from each build to kind of improve and optimize the build as they go through. And this is an example of a mid-rise project that can actually be built fully out of light wood framing up to 6 stories that is incorporating mass timber elements where they can kind of thoughtfully be used and realize some cost-saving benefits that goes along with it, as well as having the option to expose some timber structural elements inside the building. So these are, as I mentioned, 6 stories. They used light wood frame prefabricated wall panels, and each project they iteratively included more and more mass timber. So the first build, they replaced light wood frame floors with mass timber floors, and they estimated they were able to shave 8 weeks off of the construction time frame just by switching from framing light wood joists on site to mass timber floors, which they were able to install 1 floor per day. So right off the bat, they saw a major benefit from incorporating those mass timber elements into their light frame build. The second building, they decided to switch from concrete cores to mass timber cores. And that actually allowed them to save 48 working days in their schedule without having to wait for pouring and curing of concrete shafts. So this is an example of a CLT shaft they used on building number 2. They were used for the elevator and stair shafts, and they just applied a sandstone coating on the inside of those shafts to help with flame spread ratings. But other than that, they were able to leave these mass timber shafts exposed and again installed very, very quickly on site. So realizing just really significant schedule benefits. The third building is under construction now. The iteration they've done here is they're testing a different mass timber product. So instead of CLT, they're using NLT or nail laminated timber. And you can see here it has a bit of a different look to it. It's a bit of a more heritage kind of product, but being used in a more modern and commercialized way. This is as you can see, the one of the shafts on the left side there, where the panels were actually framed full height. So this realized even more schedule savings going with a balloon framed core wall there, and you can see how that looks in the corridors as well. The second group of projects that I wanted to highlight is going beyond 6 stories. So once you go taller than 6 stories, you have to use mass timber if you want to use wood construction. There's no more light framing in your structural elements. And we're seeing tons of these being built. These are all in Ontario because that's where I'm based. But I'm going to focus on one of them, which is the Halsa apartments, the second one there. And I just really wanted to highlight how they're really leaning into the prefabrication aspect of this as well. So of course, mass timber itself is a prefabricated, precision manufactured structural system that can be installed very, very quickly. And you can lean into that even more, adding levels of completion to that mass timber structure. So in this case, they're using prefabricated floor cassettes and envelope panels from Intelligent City, which is based in British Columbia. And they are able to incorporate a lot of the other building systems into those panels and lift them right into place so that you get a fully serviced and sealed in building as soon as you get all of these panels installed. So again, just really capitalizing on that prefabricated nature. This takes a lot more coordination, of course, not only with your project team, but with your construction on-site team as well. But you can really realize a lot of those schedule savings if you can capitalize on the schedule benefits. The third project I'm going to highlight is one from that business case study I mentioned that BC published, North Van Phase 2. It's an 18-story mass timber build. So BC has quite a number of buildings under construction right now that are pushing right up to the top of what the code currently allows, which is 18 stories mass timber. This is 15 stories of timber on top of a 3-story concrete podium. And they're using a really effective structural system, which is similar to the last project, which is a point supported floor slab. So you can really minimize the structural depth and capitalize on efficiencies with your wood fiber and using that type of system. And this is the project where they are able to show almost cost parity between a comparative concrete building in the case study. So have a look. The link is in the slides, and they'll really break down all the lessons learned of how they're able to achieve that on this project. And of course, you get the speed and the lower embodied carbon of benefits of using mass timber. And the final project I want to highlight is the Pathway Arbor Mill overbuild. This was taken on by the region of Peel. And they decided to do a 2-story overbuild on an existing 4-story residential building. They added 6 accessible units to the 2 top floors, and they went with mass timber for, of course, speed but also cleanliness and minimizing kind of disruptions to the site. Because of its lightweight, and they were able to install this without reinforcing any of the foundations, or very minimal reinforcing in the building below. And all of the tenants were actually able to stay in place living in their units while they installed these 2 floors on top. So yeah, lightweight, really clean, minimal noise, minimal disruption, and very quick. They were able to install this entire structure in 4 days and get that closed in. So a really great example of adding density and utilizing utilizing mass timber construction to do so in a quick and lightweight way. So that's it for my time. I just have a few highlights here. I would plug the WoodWorks Innovation Network. You can learn about these projects and more all on this database, which we've partnered with the US WoodWorks to create kind of a North American database of projects and manufacturers. You can see here, you can click in on a project. We've got tons of Canadian projects on there. And if you click in, it'll give you a full case study. We've got a video on there that we produced about this overbuild project as well. And tons of other photos, project descriptors, and project team links as well. So that is it for my time. My info's on the screen, and I'll link my LinkedIn in the chat as well. So please do reach out if you have any more questions about implementing mass timber on any of your projects. We are here to support.
That's awesome, Haley. Thank you so much for all of that. Super informative. Next up, we will have Natasha, so maybe I'll get her to slowly screen share. But a couple questions for you, Haley. So that first project, the 6-story replicable one, the first example, quick one, was the CLT for the floors as well? Yes, it
Yeah.
was.
Yeah, so that
Excellent.
was all the first build was all the floors, and then the second build was floors and cores.
Okay, perfect. And then another question here, and there's another really great one that's more general that I'll probably ask at the end, but this one is specific to the 18-story building. You mentioned about cost comparison to concrete. Do you have a percentage number for that? Can you expand on it a little bit?
Yeah, so the case study of that project that you can find the full cost breakdown in that PDF on our website. I believe the difference in overall hard costs for that mass timber portion of the project was 1.6% premium. So very, very close to cost parity with the concrete alternative.
That's excellent. Thank you for that. And I guess we'll take these other questions later on, perhaps. And Natasha Jeremik, looks like you're all ready to go. The floor is yours.
Great. Thank you, Alex. So hi, everyone. My name is Natasha Jeremick. Alex already provided a pretty good overview of who I am, but just to let you know, I'm based in Toronto. My background is structural engineering. I have a passion for sustainability, which kind of made me pivot my career path where I started working as a building envelope consultant for Part 3 buildings in Toronto, and then shifted again into the sustainability world. When I worked as a sustainability consultant, that's really where my passion for wood solutions originated. I saw just the impact that wood products can make in our decarbonization efforts, and so I wanted to be a part of it. So I left the consulting world and joined Element 5, a mass timber manufacturer here in Southern Ontario. And after that, I joined the Wood Council, and I've been here now for just over 2.5 years, where I'm the sustainability manager for codes and standards. So who are we at the Canadian Wood Council? Well, founded over 65 years ago in 1959, CWC is Canada's unifying voice for the wood products industry. So we're a national federation of associations, and our members represent hundreds of manufacturers across the country. Our members produce wood products, they grade and inspect them, certify, treat, and build with wood. So our mission is to advance the domestic wood use in Canada, and we do this by protecting and maximizing market access by advancing the development of codes and standards favorable to wood, as well as market development, where we provide solutions that create opportunities and reduce barriers for wood. And we do this by delivering focused technical support, knowledge sharing, and collaborating. Our vision at the Council is to be passionate, credible agents of change, leading and advancing a sustainable wood culture in Canada. And with that, let's dive in. So to set the stage, I first just want to talk about Canada's Green Building Strategy. So this strategy acts as a national roadmap to transforming the entire building sector, both Part 3 and Part 9 buildings, toward a low carbon future. It essentially sets the direction, targets, and best practices for provinces, municipalities, and industry to follow. You can think of this as a policy framework and a role model for all jurisdictions. The document highlights that Canada's building sector is the third largest emitting sector in Canada, following oil and gas and transportation. Our buildings contribute around 18% of the nation's emissions, but that doesn't include embodied carbon, and those emissions are trending upwards. So the updated strategy that came out last year specifically includes this text on wood, which indicates this increase of wood use globally and its environmentally beneficial properties. This includes lower embodied carbon, quicker to build with, renewable and long lasting, as well as potential for reuse. And so it touches up on a number of different themes, carbon, speed, sustainability, and circularity. And I'm going to talk a bit about each one of these. So first we'll go through speed, and Haley did a great job highlighting all the real life examples and benefits of going with mass timber on site and what sort of schedule savings you can achieve. But I just wanted to highlight here the Build Canada Homes program, which I know you're all likely well familiar with already. But we've seen in this program that it positions Canadian lumber and mass timber at the center of its housing strategy, aiming to double annual housing starts by leveraging timber-based prefab. Mass timber is specifically highlighted for its ability to cut building timelines, for its lower embodied carbon, design appeal, and ability to support mid and high-rise buildings. So we need to rapidly scale up our housing supply. We all know that, but we also need to do so responsibly so that we're minimizing the building sector's impact. And mass timber is suitable for both of those aspects. Next, we have circularity in the built environment. So for those of you that are not familiar, it's essentially a shift from the traditional take, make, use, dispose model to a system where products and materials are kept in use for as long as possible through recirculation, reuse, and recovery. So there are currently a number of research projects and initiatives taking place to look at how we can implement circularity in the built environment. And this involves creating standards to establish common terminology and frameworks, as well as a range of various research projects. It's been recognized that a large portion of construction and renovation waste is made up of wood, and so wood has been a central focus in these initiatives. A common question that we get asked at the Canadian Wood Council is whether we can use reclaimed lumber to create mass timber elements. And the challenge is that our existing grading rules do not apply to reclaimed lumber. But the National Research Council has identified this gap, and they've initiated a project which aims to develop a protocol to evaluate or grade recovered lumber, develop design specs, evaluate the fire performance, while also quantifying the socioeconomic and environmental benefits. So the Canadian Wood Council is engaged in this project as an industry partner. But until then, I have also heard of different research initiatives taking place in Western Canada, where a mass timber supplier is experimenting with producing DLT, dowel laminated timber, using reclaimed lumber. It'll be interesting to see where that lands. There are some practical challenges. I heard that particularly when it comes to denailing recovered lumber, some of the leftover metal can damage the machinery during the processing. So they're trying to figure out how to deal with that. But other than making mass timber with reclaimed lumber, there's other ways we can incorporate circularity, and that's from the beginning of the project. So designing for disassembly. And this can be achieved with mass timber by using standardized connections or reversible connections to ensure that the prefab element is easier to dismantle without any damage. Mass timber panels and elements are able to maintain their dimensional stability, yet are lighter. So that makes, lighter than certain elements like precast, which makes it easier to remove and transport and essentially easier for reuse. And lastly, as we transition to a circular economy, we can see the opportunity to maximize the carbon storage benefits of wood products. Next, we have sustainability. So wood is the only major building material that grows naturally and is renewable. Also, Canada is a recognized global leader when it comes to sustainable forest management. Canada contains 36% of the world's certified forests, and over 90% of Canada's forest land is publicly owned and managed. So this means that provinces, territories, and federal governments all create and enforce laws, regulations, and policies that are required to meet the country's commitment to sustainable forest management. This means that forest companies that operate in Canada's publicly held forests are legally required to harvest at sustainable rates and reforest the area through either natural regeneration or replanting. They also need to monitor the forest health for long-term sustainability. In context, in Canada, we harvest less than 1% of Canada's forests every single year. And Canada's timber harvesting regulations also include maximum amount of volume that we can sustainably harvest every single year over a specified period of time while still meeting the long-term environmental, economic, and social objectives. And lastly, I'm going to talk about embodied carbon. I'm going to spend a bit more time on this topic. So in order for us to be effective in reducing embodied carbon, it's important for us to understand what makes up the carbon picture. So first, we're going to take a look at Part 9 construction. So there have been various Part 9 benchmarking studies across Canada to evaluate what makes up the carbon picture. And this is an example of one which was summarized in a report issued by NRCan. It was developed by Builders for Climate Action, and it summarizes the results of 3 cities across Canada: Nelson, Toronto, and Vancouver. And so this figure here demonstrates the emission contribution on the product category basis. And while I know we're talking about mass timber today, I quickly just want to highlight that when we look at the wood framing, we see that it doesn't exceed 11% of the total impact of a Part 9 home, even though it comprises a significant portion of the structure's volume. And this is due to wood's inherently low embodied carbon properties. But now let's consider what role mass timber can play to further reduce the embodied carbon of Part 9 construction. So the largest contributor that we see here in homes is concrete, which lays in the foundations. And to reduce the amount of carbon in the foundation, the concrete can be replaced with permanent wood foundations. PWFs have historically been largely made of light wood framing, but we're seeing quite a bit of an uptake in mass timber systems in recent years. So this image here on the slide is a mass timber basement, which is by Timber Base. They're a Swiss company that recently set up an office in British Columbia and are now building mass timber basements. So the mass timber systems can be constructed in one of 2 ways: a preservative treated mass timber system using NLT, DLT, and other mass timber elements, or it can be an untreated, fully protected mass timber foundation, which would essentially be tanked, and that's commonly made of CLT and GLT. So PWFs are suitable for all types of light frame construction covered under Part 9 of the National Building Code. And the CSA S406 standard allows for 3-story construction supported by PWFs. So the standard is currently going through some updates, and they're considering including provisions for mass timber systems. But Alberta is a bit ahead. They've already updated their building code earlier this year to allow for mass timber foundations. And so we've seen quite a bit of an uptake in mass timber foundations in Alberta, where the builders essentially told us that their motivation for this was due to the carbon story. So when it comes to carbon, I don't really have right now an assessment that I can share with you to show what the carbon difference would be between a mass timber basement and a concrete one. It'd be fairly easy to calculate that using a tanked system, but we currently don't have LCA data for the preservative treated chemicals, but it's something that I'm actively looking for so that we can truly capture the full carbon picture of these systems. So stay tuned. Now we'll move on to Part 3 buildings. So this here is an example of a study that was conducted on an 8-story building. And the graphs on the bottom there show you the embodied carbon impact and their reference to the first and second buildings, which are made of concrete and steel. With each iteration, more mass timber elements are added, and we see with the more mass timber we get, the lower they're ranked. And so in these cases, not only is our embodied carbon reducing, but in those pie graphs in the dark gray, which represents the amount of concrete volume and the mass, we see those reducing as well. Now, this example is very unique to this site. A lighter superstructure doesn't necessarily always mean lower concrete or less concrete in your foundations. It really depends on your soil type. If you have soft soils, then you might end up having more concrete in your foundations. But for this specific case, we are seeing some savings. So it's important to look at each case and each project uniquely. Next, we have the Structural Engineers 2050 Commitment Program results. And sorry about the figure being super blurry. I know it's pretty awful, but they essentially published their results that they gathered for Part 3 buildings in Canada and the US for various structural systems. And for these Part 3 buildings, we got, or they received data for both mass timber and lightwood frame systems. So this graph here shows the results based on the primary horizontal gravity system. And while the data of the study comes from different building types, it's fulfilling different functions, there is a considerable amount of data here that we can start drawing some conclusions and seeing trends. And in this case, we see that the mass timber systems are ranked the second lowest. This is another figure that was produced by the study, which is essentially organized based on the primary vertical gravity system. And once again, we see the mass timber being the second lowest. So one thing I want to point out is that in both of the results tables, even though mass timber was one of the lowest, lightwood frame systems still ranked the absolute lowest. And so not only do we want to encourage lightwood framing systems over mass timber when it makes sense to do so from a constructability perspective, but we also want to encourage lightwood frame systems over mass timber due to their lower embodied carbon, as well as an efficient use of wood fiber. Now, I want to highlight that all of these studies do not include biogenic carbon. And just quickly, biogenic carbon is essentially the wood or the carbon that's stored in wood products. When a tree grows, it absorbs carbon from the atmosphere and it stores it in wood products over their lifetime. ISO, which is the International Organization on Standardization, defines biogenic carbon as carbon derived from biological origin. And wood is 50% carbon by dry weight, and 1 cubic meter of spruce pine fir wood stores roughly 770 kilograms of CO2. The amount of carbon dioxide that's stored does depend on the wood species. So if we look at Douglas fir, for instance, it stores around 900 kilograms of CO2 because it's a denser wood. So perhaps now, if we think back to the graphs that I showed before these slides, if biogenic carbon was included, then we might actually see the mass timber systems have lower values. But that's not a responsible use of wood fiber. And that's why it's also important that whenever we are looking at embodied carbon of buildings, we have to be mindful with how we consider biogenic carbon, and we should be looking at the results without biogenic carbon as well as with. Who knows that what's going to happen to these buildings at the end of their life. We don't know if at the end of life the elements are going to be repurposed to where the biogenic carbon might continue to be stored, or they might be combusted for future energy generation where the biogenic carbon is released. But regardless of the future, there still is value in using carbon storing materials. Biogenic carbon that's stored in long-lived wood products delays when emissions are released, and there's a time value associated with that. As per IStructE, it buys time for adaptation for both natural and man-made systems. It reduces the possibility of reaching dangerous climate tipping points, and it increases the potential for permanent storage through future technologies such as carbon capture and storage. And with that, I'd like to thank you for listening to my portion of the presentation. If you have any questions for me, feel free to reach out to me or drop them in the Q&A.
Tasha, that was fantastic. We'll get through a couple questions before we get to Joe. Joe, maybe you could start slowly screen sharing. But Natasha, regarding those mass timber foundations, is there a life expectancy for them?
Well, at this point, all that I'm aware of the mass timber foundations that are have been built currently, they're pretty new, so we don't really know exactly how long. We do expect them to have a life expectancy similar to the lightwood frame mass timber foundations, where they're preservative treated. I mean, it really comes down to how you finish your foundation with your building science detailing. But I see Rob unmuting himself here, and he
I was going to say that too.
he
Yes.
probably had something to say.
Well, I just wanted to highlight the first P in PWF is permanent. It's meant to be, these are permanent wood foundations. But Natasha's right. It depends. If you make some uh, mistakes, you're going to have susceptible foundations, but that's going to be the case whether they're concrete or wood. And the timber base company that Natasha mentioned that came from Switzerland and set up base in BC, they put a lot of moisture monitors in their basement, in their foundations. And I actually had the privilege of touring the Switzerland project where this was out of, and they did have a leak, and it came from their water tank that was in the house. But this moisture meter picked it up, and before there was even any damage at all, I mean, any real damage other than a water stain, they had caught that and fixed the issue. Now that came from inside the house; it wasn't a leak external, but you got to be careful with how you detail things, and therefore I bring you back to the word permanent.
That's well said. And I will mention, Joe, Frank, you could chime in one moment here, but Joe Geluch and the Naikoon folks provided a brochure from that Swiss company, and we'll certainly add that to the slide deck after. And I know Joe is going to mention it as well in his presentation. Frank, did you want to say something?
Yeah, no, I just wanted to add to what Rob was saying, and in Europe it's quite common. Natasha, you mentioned the tanked version, which is it sounds like it's it's tanked, it's gone, but it's actually just preparing the opening, your excavation, such that it works like almost a waterproof tank. And I think it's not that common in Canada. I think, or at least I'm not hearing that much about it. And maybe that's something to consider for us, maybe for if we do another mass timber, to maybe highlight what that entails, rather than the preserved, or sorry, the permanent wood foundations which are treated. So that's what all I wanted to add. This may be something for us to take note of. Thanks.
That's great. And I will ask one more question to Natasha. Doesn't concrete store carbon as well? It requires carbon to make. What's the comparative storage between concrete and wood?
So concrete absorbs carbon. It's different than biogenic carbon. So concrete essentially, during the manufacturing process, it's a very, very tiny amount that it absorbs. And there's currently no standardized methodology on how to calculate that. But once it's produced and it's in use, and later on when it's broken down into aggregates, it does absorb carbon dioxide from the environment. The amount that it absorbs really depends on your surface area of the concrete, as well as the elements that you have, like the concrete mix that goes into it. And so I don't think I've ever seen a true comparison of how much it stores compared to wood. But as I mentioned, because it's highly dependent on surface area, it would be maybe a somewhat, maybe I guess you would compare a concrete column to a wood column, glulam column to do your carbon comparison, but I haven't seen anything produced yet.
Well said. Joe, if you don't mind, slowly coming in here, and you could share your screen when you're ready. And as that's happening, another question for you, Natasha. Maybe we could buy Joe a bit of time. Hi, Natasha. You mentioned we currently harvest 1% of the Canadian forests and that there is a limit on how much we can harvest annually. Um, do you know what the limit is and how it might impact the Canadian MT's capacity? In other words, given the sustainably available resources, how much can this industry grow compared to where we currently are at? And sorry, I butchered that. But if you can provide some context, that'd be great.
Yeah, that's a great question. And I actually had some slides on this, but I thought my presentation was getting a little too long. So I don't know if I can either reshare my screen now or if I can answer this later on when we jump into Q&A. Alex, what do you
Yeah,
think?
that's fair. Joe's ready now. I think that's a great approach. Thanks, Natasha. And
Okay.
Joe, whenever you're ready.
Hello. Thanks everyone. Thanks for having me. Happy to share some of our experiences. I think those were great presentations from both Haley and Natasha, and I can actually dance around a little bit from both sides, which is fantastic. So there's definitely some continuity here. I'm Joe Geluch. I'm the CEO of Naikoon Contracting. We're based in North Vancouver. Our company has three distinct groups. One is luxury custom housing. One is more Part 3 buildings, both residential and mixed use. And then the other is a specialty subcontractor installing mass timber, prefabricated structures, and really acting as an integrator or a consultant to be able to apply the architecture, the engineering, and the owner's desires for ourselves or for other general contractors in successfully executing prefabrication, which CLT and mass timber we drop into. So ultimately, everything we do, we always assess the ability to prefabricate, which is just a symptom of trying to be more efficient. And often we end up with hybrid systems, including CLT, mass timber, and other methods of offsite construction. So happy to share some examples of these and really cover mostly the what, and then I'll get into a little bit of the why and the how, and hopefully we can have a good discussion with questions on use cases in some of our projects and the others, and then understanding reasons why behind selecting mass timber as an option for the project, which is I find as a quite hot subject right now and trying to find ways to use it successfully. So just covering really what works, and we can discuss about what doesn't as well. So I'll cover mostly low density stuff, 6 stories and unders, both from houses and projects. A little bit of how we got started. Our first CLT project was back in 2012. I think it was the or one of the first CLT panels that was produced out of structure lam in Canada. And we built a small garage off of the home of an architect friend of ours at McFarland Marceau Architects. That was quite fascinating, and it sort of led us on our journey to today, where we've covered luxury housing, interior fit outs, and really furniture use cases of CLT, structure and furniture, and then into mixed use commercial residential buildings, as well as remote cabins. And now we haven't constructed a multi-residential building with the use case of CLT, but they're certainly around, and really some good studies on why or why not with CLT. Really like understanding some of those decision-making processes. We find single structure for structure use case in many projects doesn't make sense. And so we need to combine multiple benefits to the project, which may be qualitative or quantitative, but a combination of those is typically how we get to a use case that actually gets constructed and built. So kind of covering structure, aesthetic, carbon, economics, innovation, codes now certainly a factor on fire codes and things like that as they, excuse me, as they change. And so ultimately, there's others as well, but there's multiple considerations that are going to be able to get us to a yes decision on actualizing the construction of the building. Part 9, starting housing. I pulled this beautiful photo of this home that we constructed years back, and ultimately, this is an interesting case where the aesthetic that the architect wanted to achieve, and you can see large cantilevers unsupported with thin overhang profiles, started to make a use case for mass timber. And I wanted to highlight this. Aspect Engineers was the structural on this, but what we have here on the right side of my screen is a CLT wall beam that's actually holding up a large portion of the home, also acting as the structural wall. And it gave the architect the ability to achieve the design intent that they were looking for in that project. A little bit of a breakdown, early days of components and how to actually deliver, execute efficiently with this type of construction. We need to move into digital modeling, and we need to be taking a manufacturing approach to everything we do. So this is an early model, 10, 12 years back. Stefan Schneider, Cut My Timber, is a great company who assisted us with this project. You can see sort of the wall beam use case on the right there that's actually holding up the whole portion of that floor as well as the roof structure above. And then you can also see applications here as we come out to the front of the building, where the original design was sort of 3-inch LVLs at 3 inches on center to be able to achieve a thin profile, and it was done using CLT. Maybe shifting gears here into a mixed use project where you can see the assembly of this project in Vancouver, where CLT is used as the wall structure. It's also used as the floor structure. And the innovation in this project was that there's no posts and there's no beams. It's clear span CLT glued together with a product that allowed a very unique use case in this application. The other thing I wanted to highlight in this building that's transferable to both multifamily and commercial is the elevator core that was done out of CLT, which was similar to what Haley had showed us earlier in another project. And some of the details here. So, the elevator contractor told us that was the straightest, truest, plumbest shaft that they've ever put an elevator in, and certainly as a replacement to concrete. Any of you that are in that business understanding a six-story concrete shaft often is not true and straight and causes significant challenges in the installation of the elevator. You can also see here on the left a fully clad CLT envelope facade panel. So these were all prefabricated off-site, and the entire structure and envelope was installed in about 15 days for this building to be watertight. And so again, 15 days instead of many months, but a lot of the pre-planning required to be able to achieve this. So there's sort of a shot of that, which was a great project. Here's another application in a civic building in which the roofing membrane was pre-installed. The first layer of the roofing membrane was pre-installed and gave us the ability to, again, make another use case for CLT where you wouldn't be able to do that with a stick frame roof and provided a benefit. The same building here where the the finish, the structure, the support beams and everything pre-installed and flown in a matter of minutes versus an installation sequence, which allows us to be watertight, allows us to protect this finish, and gives us a beautiful building at the conclusion. Just some numbers. I think it'd be interesting to talk about this if we have time. Ultimately, trying to understand, this is the same building, a post-disaster building, and really the exploration exercise collaboratively with the architect, the engineer, and the rest of the consultants to try and find what the best solution for this particular project is, what the line-by-line item cost comparisons would be, and then unpacking the rest of the knock-on effects. So if you're a developer, you know that time is money, you've got interest costs, you've got occupancy, that income that's going to start. And so what's a month worth? What's 2 months worth to the developer? And can we achieve that with mass timber? And the same on the general contractor side. If we're able to reduce 2 months of our Division 1 general requirements, we've got to add all of these factors into the calculation. So I think it's very critical when assessing a use case for CLT on any type of building that we're not just looking at a line by line. Here's the concrete cost, here's the CLT cost. The CLT is going to come out higher in most cases, but what are the other benefits that we're getting out of that, either qualitative or quantitative? And then understand what the decision wants to be from the owner side. And I'll get into some of those other more qualitative benefits later. And then a residential building here, there was a highlight, Haley highlighted a couple of those too, where we're seeing successful modeling and execution of CLT floor systems in multi-unit buildings to create speed. And then certainly there's some learnings that some can share now, as it's been done many times around both sound, fire, subtrade, change to subtrade workflows. And this is also a real critical piece where is the subtrade market ready to realize savings via the use of prefabrication? If a subtrade doesn't have to drill 4,000 holes in a building, can their price come down? It should, but being able to actually apply those and realize those gains is something that I think the industry is still working towards as we are slow adopters. And then just another case of some sections here on a use case of a CLT floor system with a concrete slab to achieve longer spans inside of a mixed-use building. I think this application separating a mixed-use building where we have a different use on level 1 that requires fire separation between the residential side. Typically, we're seeing those in concrete and concrete slabs, and so there's definitely use case here for CLT CLT to create a unique space below, as well as still achieve the fire ratings required that typically would be used in concrete in most applications. Just a little bit into there's some of the what, a little bit into some of the how. So certainly tooling up your teams to be able to either bring a consultant on board to assist you or start understanding manufacturing and viewing your construction as logistics and manufacturing and moving into a design for manufacturing and assembly model. So digitization is critical to successful prefab. And we found it actually has multiple other benefits that are helping mitigate some of the challenge we face sometime in completion of design and having all of the information communicated in a set of drawings for our construction team. I'm sure others have faced that before. So it really forces a design intensity and a design freeze early, which helps the rest of the project outside of the actual structural application that we're using it for as well. So very critical. And ultimately just some basic steps on how we would work backwards to achieve a successful execution, which is critical to realizing some of the cost benefits. I threw this in here, just sort of some advanced digital modeling. This is a recent project that was executed, and the ability to know every piece and every sequence of installation and being able to translate that onto the site where 20 or 30,000 square foot building can get built in a matter of days versus a matter of months, and then trying to apply that benefit into the pro forma and the decision-making use case during the design development phase, again, is critical. It allows us, of course, to achieve precision manufacturing. So this is a panel that's come from Kalashnikov math timber, and the model described where the bolt was going to be, and the vendor was able to cut that in and drill holes through the panels, and trying to take that and apply it to cost savings downstream is something that, again, the industry is still working towards with the sophistication of our subtrade partners to make sure that that's realized in the exercise to make a decision to move to CLT or to a prefabricated member. Switching gears here, maybe to like occupant experience benefits or biophilia, biophilic design, the connection to nature, the reduced stress of an office environment or a home environment with natural materials, and certainly a trend that we've been seeing for many years. And of course, you see very unique spaces. And so leasing agents in commercial or residential applications for rental housing, the big discussion, will somebody lease or rent this space for a small premium because it's unique and it's got a wood feel versus a concrete shell feel. And so all of these cases, I think, are making headway and ultimately need to be applied into that decision-making factor. So just some different shots from various projects, and highlight a project we're just concluding now, which is more of a remote cabin, single-family residence, and entirely constructed out of CLT. You can see the renders on the left. It's a very unique feel, and so where do we find value in that? And in this case, the owner was so excited about that they're willing to pay, in this case, a small cost premium to be able to achieve this versus a more traditional construction method. Again, back to the modeling and understanding mechanical and trades and how to apply that into cost benefit analysis decisions early. So application on the ceilings here in both cases, if you can take a multi-unit residential building that would typically have these services running through holes drilled on site through TGI joists versus an application like this where the services will go in and there'll be a drop ceiling below. finding a subtrade that will validate and actually give cost reduction on not using a price per square foot basis that they're used to pricing jobs, I think is an exercise in educating and trying to help them understand, did we save you 4,000 holes? Is that two laborers for 3 months? That you don't need anymore, and where can we see the benefit so that we can apply that into our cost benefit analysis on the use case. And so these are critical pieces to make those cost benefit analysis accurate. And so being able to model that and be able to do that as an exercise early is critical to be able to communicate these benefits to an owner or to a builder. Natasha, I can't remember if it was Haley. I think it was Natasha that covered off sort of subtraining use of CLT. So we constructed some test pits with FP Innovations out at UBC here in Vancouver. And so right now they're monitoring air conditions, moisture levels, and everything out there for the last several years to really understand how this timber will perform in subterranean conditions. And also Timber Base and Stefan Zolig have executed this in Europe and are now moving to execute this in Canada. And we've explored this for single family residence application right now. And certainly remote application. We do a lot of remote work with different Indigenous groups, and I think there's a very excellent use case here to come back to wood foundations with the use of CLT. Wood foundations have been around for a long time, and I still know homes up in my hometown of Masset, BC, remote area where you've got a 40-year-old foundation that's constructed out of wood and it's still solid and sound. So I think the tanking aspect of that and sort of some of the description here. I put Bruno's contact. I think he's on the call today. He's in Vancouver in Canada. If anyone's interested in checking that out, which I find quite fascinating and I think could be a real winner, especially with with the carbon conversation. So maybe recap like a cost conversation. This is always the topic. How much? How many percent more? And the answer is going to be dependent on a project by project basis. And so what we know and what we've learned is replacing a 2x6 wood structural wall with a CLT wall is there's not going to be a case for that typically that makes sense. However, if you can achieve a structural benefit that you couldn't do with that with that light wood frame, now you've got a multi benefit. If you can expose some finish, now you've got some finish benefit. If there's a fire or an acoustics case for CLT, that needs to be factored in, and then of course carbon and other factors that need to be considered, and then the qualitative side. If that owner or that space wants to be unique, and we feel we can get a premium for that from a rental application side or from a innovation or marketing side, then adding all these things up is going to make many use cases that we've seen successful why those projects got built. But we have certainly seen applications where the team is not prepared with the level of experience to do a proper cost analysis, and then CLT gets thrown out. We revert back to concrete. And so those are sad cases, but we're seeing less and less of those with our experience and ability to provide the data into the system, as long as we're at the table early enough with the design partners to be able to do that. Of course, I mentioned our sub-trades and the sort of downstream execution of the work. And, this is where getting everybody at the table early in a collaborative, integrated format at design stage is so critical for everyone to actually come back and provide the realized benefits, both for trades, for schedules, and then costs beyond the line item. So interest costs and other things on time-based savings are critical to consider. And then, of course, the early planning, the digitization of any prefabricated project. It's going to reduce waste, it's going to reduce errors, and it's going to force design intensity that I mentioned earlier, mitigates some of the downstream challenges that us as constructors have of trying to execute projects with incomplete detailing. So it forces detailing and it forces it to be done in a digital environment before we're in the ground, where all of the money risk and intensity typically comes. And so we found just the process as a general contractor has helped the projects considerably far outside of the actual prefabricated structure. Um, so ultimately, yeah, it looked like a lot of folks on here that this is new or they're exploring. Ultimately, you saw what we started with 14 years ago was a garage, had 6 panels. It allowed us to try it, understand, learn some lessons, and then progress from there over the last 14 years. So I would encourage you to try a pilot project. Understand the right team of experience. There's an incredible amount of experience across Canada now, probably some of the best in the world, if I'm being frank. And BC has a big pocket of these as well as building up in Ontario. So find the right integrated team. And then really make sure there's a clear use case developed, right? So there has to be a why, and I think there's a number of examples of why CLT or mass timber was selected across this range of Part 9 and Part 3 projects, and then executed, and you have to start somewhere. So I'll conclude there with a little inspiring slide. You can do it if you want to do it, and there are business cases for us to do it as builders and developers. So thanks for listening. Hopefully that was helpful and connected to the other presentations, and look forward to questions and conversations around the subject.
Thank you, Joe. This was amazing. Alex, do you think there are any questions directly to Joe's, or should we just move to the panel and then we'll go into the main question and answers after?
Yeah, okay, that works for me. Or I do have one for Joe while you're getting the screen
Yeah.
ready. Joe, this is very, builder centric. What is the typical lead time from the agreed upon final drawings to finally the shipment to site? Do you have a ballpark?
Yeah, super great question. Of course, really hard to answer depending on the magnitude of the project and the size and so on and so forth. What I can say is that the planning intensity of a typical contractor needs to move forward. And it's very critical that we're moving into a digital environment so that we have enough lead time to hit the critical path of execution. We've seen projects and we've experienced projects in which there's no point prefabricating if you have a foundation constructed and then it sits there for 4 to 6 weeks waiting for your product to come because you've lost all of your efficiencies. So I can't answer it specifically, the lead time, but I can say that the design intensity and the planning intensity needs to have a shift forward. We can't show up on the job to start digging a hole and start planning. So hopefully that answers it specifically. But it can be many months or even years, depending on the magnitude or complexity of the project, to get it to a production.
Oh, that's great. And Frank, all
Yes.
yours.
Thank you. So I think so. The next is the panel discussion, and we'll have these questions up there. Before we do that, I do believe we have another poll. We wanted to run the poll again that we ran in the beginning, essentially asking everyone where they are now, they think. I don't have the question in there. Okay, there. Now that you've participated in today's webinar, how likely are you to consider implementing mass timber into your next projects? I mean, while everyone's answering, and I don't see the answers, by the way, I learned a lot today. This was really good from all angles. So someone, either Alex or Natasha, would have to tell me what the
Yeah,
results look like, or show the results.
it's brilliant.
And
It's exactly, what we wanted to see or what I was personally hoping to see. It's kind of completely shifted, right? At the beginning it was, or I know I can't say right to Frank because he doesn't see this, but at the
maybe
beginning
you
it
can
was,
close the poll, then I see it actually. If you
yeah,
close the
yeah,
poll.
sure.
Yeah, yeah.
Just
Thank you.
there we
Oh,
go.
look at
Boom.
that. Yes.
There you go.
See,
So
that's
brilliant.
perfect. Thank you. Yeah, so this is 100% also for us to validate that we hit the right tones. There's probably a lot of questions. Thanks by the way, for the panelists who've already answered many questions online to the question and answer panel. Hopefully, we're going to get to a few of them afterwards. Let's start maybe with the panel question. for everyone, and maybe we go with who do we start with here with Joe first? But what's the single thing that you would tell someone not to ignore when designing for mass timber? And I think you had a lot of those, so maybe you could pick one. What's the single thing not to ignore when designing for mass timber above all?
That's such a good one. I think today, the right team at the right time.
Right.
So as a builder, of course, I'm biased, but we need the subject matter experts at the table during the early phases of design because it's the contractor and the subtrades, the people executing the work that are going to be able to provide critical feedback in a collaborative environment with the professionals. And so getting the thinkers and the doers in the room at the right time so that we can optimize design and not have to find ways to fix or to change concepts based on the expertise that comes out of the market that sometimes conflicts with the expertise in the design. Not to say either one is incorrect, but when it comes down to actual costing, business case use, unfortunately, we've seen projects that should have and could have been built in mass timber, and they get thrown out back to traditional methods simply because of the intensity required and the need to get building and not having
Right.
enough time early enough to optimize it.
Thanks. And so maybe with the WoodWorks and Wood Council team, we go to Rob first, and then maybe to the other two speakers, unless you guys prefer a different order. But what would you think? What's the most important thing not to ignore, knowing all the other forms of constructions we typically use?
Hmm. I, I think Joe hit the nail on the head, or maybe I should say he inserted the bit perfectly into the self-tapping screw, which is more appropriate for mass timber. That you include everything in your costing, not just look at the line by lines. I really like what Joe said there, and we've been saying similar things. You need to account for all the different costs, put them in together, and not just focus on the fact that maybe this one line is more expensive than the other line.
Right. Perfect. Anything else to add there, Natasha or Haley? Or
So, definitely my first reaction is what Joe alluded to is explore design assists contracts with your mass timber manufacturer, supplier. They're all willing and happy to assist you throughout that process. It helps you optimize your panels, it helps you optimize your design, reduce waste, and ultimately save you costs once you decide to actually go into fabrication. So, highly encourage you to explore that. But since we've already kind of said that, and I see that there's a question about moisture, I would also say consider moisture management.
right.
So moisture management is very important when it comes to mass timber buildings. Essentially, when we talk about moisture management, we're talking about when it's getting built, so before it's enclosed, and there has to be very close consideration of the roles and responsibilities, like who's going to wipe out the puddles that accumulate on the panels, who's going to protect the wood,
Oh, I
and
see. Okay. Yeah.
because wood can get wet, but it can, it needs to dry out. And before you enclose it, you need to have it within tolerable moisture contents, because once you do enclose it, then you're going to get a very high moisture content building, which you don't want. And it's going to take even longer to dry that out.
Right. We
Um,
saw some of that on the pictures, actually. It's true. Those puddles. Great.
Yeah, yeah. And so that's okay. And but in terms of like the experience with taller structures, I mean, you really want to enclose it as quickly as possible. And we have seen some case or some projects that have gone up where, they're still building the higher floors, but they have the enclosure already in on the lower levels. So enclosing it as quickly as possible is your best strategy. And just a really quick plug is CWC is currently developing a moisture management guide for construction, and it is set to be published in spring of 2026. So we're hoping that that's going to provide some more standardized guidance on how to deal with moisture management on site.
Great. Haley, anything quick to add other than make sure WoodWorks is part of the project or?
Yeah, don't ignore the free resource that's available to you all the way
So,
across the country. Yeah, I would
excellent.
really
Thank
just
you.
echo everything everyone said. It's upfront collaboration, and please do feel free to include WoodWorks in that collaboration because we're here to share lessons learned from other projects that have been built all the way across the country, and connect you with those great project teams and manufacturers that everyone's been talking about. So yeah, don't hesitate to reach out.
Thank you. And so back to Joe, the question may be mounted from a bit from the other side. When you remembering back when you started, were there any design changes that surprised you when working with mass timber? And again, I think you mentioned the whole, the team is obviously part, but is there anything else that surprised you the most? It's like, oh, I didn't realize that we had to do it this way, or was there anything like that? Any aha moment of that
Yeah, I
kind?
mean, absolutely. I mean, I would say it fundamentally changed the way that we approach the planning and execution of every project, mass timber or not, and just really understanding the lens of the the contractor executing and the team executing is, it's logistics and manufacturing and assembly. And so if we're not influencing or participating in the design, which is intended to inform us how to manufacture and assemble, then we sometimes get into situations where um, we we need to go backwards, and that's very costly and can put projects at risks. And so I think that, and then just double down on that, the downstream. I'll give a great example of one of the early projects that we executed successfully, and the building went up so fast and was ready for services and subtrades so quick. They didn't believe the schedule. And then we had they just didn't believe that it would be 2 weeks. They say, yeah, yeah, everybody else says that too. Okay, you want us January, we're just planning for March. And then it's like we're ready, and they weren't ready. And so I think that was one thing that stood out. And then you lose, if you lose 2, 3 weeks off your time savings, then you're starting to erode the business case for it. So I think it's more of a process thing, and really shifting the mentality of the entire team, and all the way downstream with the subtrades that this needs, if we're going to be planned with a structure and envelope that's executed really, really fast, then so does the rest of the project
Right.
downstream. And so
Yes.
there's
Yeah.
this big planning gap that typically people would be used to. So that's just one really critical example that we've learned,
And I
and
think that's,
preparing
yeah,
for.
that's perfect because as people may try out to just do one element, let's say the floors, and add that into their typical other normal construction schedule, that may hit exactly how you just said, that one part is suddenly much faster than the other. And slightly on the same angle, and maybe we'll start with Haley now, and maybe we should try to give our answers a bit briefer so that we get to some of the questions and answer from the audience. But when working with builders and renovators, and if I understand this correctly, it's mostly WoodWorks that does that. What is challenging them most with mass timber? Is there anything different, or is what Joe just explained really the learning, the new schedule, and the precision of that? Is that the same, or are you observing something else?
Yeah, I think it's a lot of what we've already been talking about, the planning, the moisture management. Maybe one thing I'll add is just like the scoping of these projects and understanding what your subtrades are going to be, how they're going to work together, especially if you have hybrid structures with different trades working together. It's really important to work on that sequencing so that if they're sharing a crane, that goes ahead smoothly, nobody's missing scope of who's installing like a steel connector that goes on a mass timber beam to column, that
All
sort of
right.
thing. So yeah, that trade coordination and sequencing is going to be super important to take care of. Yeah.
Perfect. And maybe I'll jump straight maybe to Rob. You know, we talked fire and sound a little bit, and I mentioned earlier the challenges maybe with fire separations and fire protection as we move to missing middle construction. Are there any changes or code changes or even provincial changes? I think some of them are mentioned along the presentations, but are there any national changes that are worth mentioning or provincial changes that you think you want to highlight here, Rob?
Um, there are some coming in 2025 and 2030. 2025, there's some slight building height increases that are, I think, going to be permitted. And there's some more exposed ceilings, more exposed areas. People really
Yes.
want to build mass timber to see the exposure, the exposed wood. So I think more of that will come. In 2030, there's a potential that we can have higher than 18 stories even with mass timber.
Wow.
But that's not yet approved to proceed at the code level, but we are hoping that it will. But there's also potential that there could be higher unencapsulated mass timber construction as well. So more of that, even compared to the 2025 code. So I'll leave it there for now, Frank.
Sure, thank you. Yeah, and then maybe I'm not sure what the questions will. We'll jump to the questions, and maybe I will say this now. If anyone, we probably will go a few minutes over because I think we have a number of questions, and I'll pass it back to Alex in a sec. If you have to leave at 2 o'clock, that's fine. You can always access the recording for catching up on the last couple of questions that we may have. And if you do jump off early and you don't see my closing, thanks for attending. And also keep in mind the recording is there. Also stay tuned for the next webinar. We haven't announced a topic and or a slide, a subject yet, but we will get there. So stay tuned in the same channels where we normally promote those. And with that pre-announcement of our closing at 2, I'll pass it back to Alex for some questions from the audience.
Thanks, Frank. And I'm going to be a little unorthodox here and kind of jump the line. I do have a question for Joe. I was a building official for 10 years, Joe. Um, you know, when a building official goes on site and they see the same thing over and over again, they can get used to that and it becomes a little more simple. If I ran into one of your projects, I would have a lot of questions and probably cause delays inadvertently. So can you expand or provide some context on how it's been, dealing with the authorities having jurisdiction in the municipalities? Is it a big learning curve or has it been, smooth sailing?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I think been dealing with that going back 15 years with early passive house and net zero and and some of these different assemblies that have now become codified in BC. Certainly, some of them, but I think from my experience here in Vancouver, it's been very positive, where it's not, well, what's that you're doing? You can't do that. It's more, well, that's very interesting. Can you explain that to us? And then I think just having a group of seasoned professionals to be able to help communicate that information, often with a stamp on the piece of paper to help the building official. With their role of ensuring things are built to code and sort of keeping the city's liability down really is often what some of those challenges are. But it's typically been very positive. We're fortunate here in North Vancouver where our office is that the city of North Vancouver. A lot of the senior leaders there are very excited about mass timber, passive house, and innovation, both in the digital space and in the construction space. And so it's been quite easy for us from that regard. Not to say it's not a lot of work, but being able to have them understand and use WoodWorks content and other content and studies that have been done. I mean, there's enough information out there now that we shouldn't have to learn our own lessons as an industry. And so I really just like small segue into that, anyone on the call, that there's enough content and open source information in Canada that please don't go out and try to learn your own lessons. I think there's lots of people out here that could help, and I would apply that straight to the building officials, where we've used lots of these studies and brought in experts on this call and to help move those conversations along. Often the fire chiefs are one in different jurisdictions that we do have some pretty major inconsistencies with, for sure.
Right.
Well said. And really the essence of the early adopter series as well is let's learn lessons. Let's learn from other people's mistakes, sort of thing. Another question here. The trade adoption point is really interesting. Do you see modular or mass timber products becoming its own trade? How has the adoption been by colleges, associations, governments? Do we need more or different education of labor, or is it just a slight learning curve for already qualified professionals, i.e., is there a skill gap or just an implementation gap? I think that last sentence says it all. Is there a skill gap or just an implementation gap? I'm not sure who wants to take that. I see Joe has unmuted himself. Maybe we'll start with you.
I'll pause. Haley looks like Haley, you got a someone that.
Sure, yeah, and I answered it. I put an answer, a bit of an answer in the chat as well. But I do think it's sort of been the latter. I think these newer systems are really sometimes a combination of existing trades skills that maybe just need to be certain workforces need to be upskilled. So we're seeing a lot of GCs, for example, sending their in-house carpenters to training programs such as the Toronto Carpenters Union chapter has or the College of Carpenters has a mass timber training program. They just send them there. They get a few updated learnings on what mass timber is, hoisting and rigging that they might not necessarily have in their baseline carpenter training, and then that gets them to the point where they're able to work with these materials, but they still need to have that baseline carpenter's knowledge. So yeah, I think between like carpentry and erection of on-site like hoisting and rigging, the skills are there. It's really just a combination.
Yeah,
That's well said. Joe, go ahead. Sorry about that.
yeah, no, I can. I mean, I think it's both for sure. The training and implementation. I think the training is a step in successful implementation. We do see BCIT here in the Lower Mainland that has a micro credential in mass timber that we helped them put together years ago. That's been very successful, and then lots of discussion. I think just generally, with the carpentry trainers and sort of Red Seal program nationwide. Big discussion around both energy performance, envelope, and modern methods of construction, and where that curriculum wants to fit into the carpentry program. I went through 20 plus years ago, and a lot of the content's the same. And so the industry is moving pretty fast, technology is moving pretty fast. I would say adoption and implementation of this, certainly in the West Coast, has moved quite fast, and now how do we catch the industry up, and not just the installers, the erectors, but the downstream sub trades. And one other note that we're seeing after years of subtrade specialization and segregation, right down to, there's caulking contractors. That's all they do is caulk. And I have started to see more of an integration, and we've positioned our business certainly into more of an integration where we can cover specialized structure and envelope and just grab all of that interconnected scope and deliver it as a multi-sub, because they are so interconnected now, where Haley mentioned earlier, scope gaps on, you've got steel, you've got envelope, you've got timber, you've got another component, and you've got five trades and five consultants all trying to put this together in sequence. So I think we are seeing more consolidated specialists in the market, or design assist groups that can come and execute post consulting early. And so I think we'll see that trend continue out of necessity.
Mm.
Very well said. This next one, to assist traditional stick-built project staff, framers, etc., understand their role. What initiatives, let me restart this. What initiatives, if any, are underway to assist traditional stick-built project staff, framers? I think you just kind of touched on this. I guess how can we, leverage mass timber with our existing stock? And I guess you did kind of touch on that. do you have anything more to add to that, or I mean, our previous conversation, I guess, did cover
Or
that.
maybe are there any formal programs that we know of? So, the question I think came from Nova Scotia, for example, is WoodWorks represented everywhere? I think you showed the map. Like, is there other than our webinar, replaying our webinar every day to teach, are there other courses or programs? Is maybe also a good expansion of that question. Anyone from the
Um,
podcast? Yeah.
I'm not aware of any program specifically on the East Coast, but we do have a WoodWorks Atlantic program and regional programs all the way across the country that can connect you with resources in your area, or even come in and give you a hands-on presentation to your staff on like what the differences are and things to be aware of. Um, we've got tons of resources online through the Wood Council website, of course. But yeah, for example, as I mentioned in Ontario, the Carpenters College has, or the College of Carpenters and Allied Trades, just in Vaughan here outside of Toronto, has a training program for their carpenters to upskill into mass timber. So there are programs like that. BCIT is another one. And just a quick plug for our education manager that we have, Blériot at the CWC. He's working with a lot of colleges and trades to get more training programs into action.
Great.
That's
Thanks.
great. I mean, we've talked about this a little bit about the time saving, but has anyone conducted a study to compare traditional construction and mass timber schedules? While traditional methods take longer to build on site, mass timber will require more planning and offsite construction. Interested in finding out the delta. So, Joe, you've mentioned this a lot, and Haley as well. But are there studies that have been done?
Yeah, certainly. I think there's several. We participated in one, actually on one of the projects I showed, which was through FII forestry. Someone help me out with that. What FII stands for?
Forestry Innovation Investment, I believe.
Yeah. So you can look that up, FII. There's case study posted on there that was highlighting. We actually studied there's some funding to allow us to study the execution schedule in 15-minute increments, and somebody watching each panel go in and comparing that to the model and installation sequencing. But I'm not sure if the question is actually more around how much did that save versus how much did this cost on the front end on the pre-construction and planning? And I think that's a great question. And it's hard. We've had a hard time quantifying the cost of, I'll tell you this. We know there's value there, but to actually quantify it, the cost of the pre-construction planning effort and digitization, compared against the realized savings in the execution, it's a really tricky study. So I don't know of anything on that. I don't know if WoodWorks or others have anywhere to direct that question as well.
Yeah, it's certainly a really complex issue. I'll say like the case study I mentioned earlier, they do have some soft costs for design fees and stuff in that comparison as well. And the schedule that they show in the case study for the project that I mentioned is actually, they didn't really assume much schedule savings at all. They were quite conservative with the comparison. So all of that, all of those savings came from other line items. And another thing to throw into the mix is labor. You need a much smaller labor force on site to erect mass timber than you do to do a poured concrete system, on the order of like 1/3 or 1/4 of the workforce. So it's quite large savings there as well. Um, yeah, so it's just there's so many factors that go into it. One other thing to maybe add to the complexity is um, like cost escalation. The more work you do upfront on any type of project, the more you invest in collaboration and coordination before you start construction, the more savings you're going to have during construction by avoiding cost escalation, change orders, things coming up on site that were unforeseen. So that's also really hard to quantify, because you don't know what might have come up on site if you didn't do the coordination up front.
No, that's very well said. Frank, do we have time for one more?
I have one
Thanks, Alex.
addition to that
Oh,
as
go ahead,
well.
Rob. All yours.
Yeah. FP Innovations just released a book called Offsite Wood Construction Handbook, and I haven't read it all through, but it might be also helpful to download. I think it's free as well. And any of us could provide a link to that.
Mhm.
Ah, that's good. My chat is live. That's
Yeah,
funny.
Frank and I are talking to each other in front of everyone. Don't mind us.
Yeah, perfect.
Um,
It's okay. I was just going to say probably one more question because that's
Excellent.
I was
Yeah,
just wondering if there's time for me to address those wood supply
please.
and fires question.
Absolutely, Natasha. Maybe, yeah, if you could just pose the question again and then just set the
Uh,
context.
um, Okay, so do you want me to share this my screen? So there was a question.
sure.
There were two of them. One was about how much wood supply do we actually have, and how does that relate to the uptake in mass timber construction? And then there was also a question about how do wildfires impact the amount of wood supply? So I'm just going to really quickly share my screen. Um, okay, so can somebody give me a thumbs up that you can see my screen right
Yep.
now?
Good to go. Wood
Okay.
supply.
Okay, great. So, as I was talking about Canada's regulations around forestry, those regulations also include how much we're sustainably allowed to harvest every single year. And so that's called wood supply. And so they define this as annual allowable cut. And in practice, the annual harvest volume is allowed to be a bit higher or lower, but essentially it has to average out over the regulation period, which is around 5 to 10 years. And so in this graph here, this shows the wood supply for all of Canada. So over the last several decades or few decades. So we start off, the green line shows you how much we're allowed to sustainably harvest every single year, and the black line shows how much we actually harvest. So if we look at 2021, for instance, we see that we harvested less than 70% of how much we were able to harvest. And so there's been a consistent gap between how much supply we have versus how much we're actually using. But one thing that's important about this graph is that you can see the green line is actually decreasing. And quite frankly, it's going to continue decreasing in the next several years due to the changing climate. And as it was mentioned, forest fires were one of them, or wildfires were included. And so every year we see the annual allowable cuts decreasing because of insect outbreaks, because of wildfires, protection of caribou, as well as old growth forests. And as a result, this doesn't mean that we should stop harvesting our forests. When we use our forest products, that means we're investing in forest management, we're investing in fire management, and that leads to better seed management. We can, regenerate our forests to be more resilient to these natural disturbances. And so we should continue using our wood products when it comes to mass timber at scale. I believe right now mass timber makes up, like I heard, less than 2% of the total construction market. So it's a really tiny portion. And there's a huge opportunity there. Every single one of the mass timber plants, or almost every single one, I would say, has been looking to expand or is currently expanding. And so there's definitely a huge opportunity there to continue, dipping into our breadbasket. So I hope that answers the questions, but if not, I provided my email, so feel free to reach out to me.
Great, thank you. Yeah, that was fantastic. Thanks for the update, Natasha. And I think what we'll do, we'll put a little label in the video earlier when we post the recording that your slides are at the end, and then people can find it because I think you referred to having slides earlier. So that's a perfect. I will share for the last slide so you get to see um, all our emails. Just a second. There you go. And advance to the next slide. There you go. And this is then the official um, closing. And thanking you all again for attending. I think there's still it's 90 people still left. I saw the number dwindling slightly. We hope that the format and content of today's webinar helped everyone in understanding how to integrate mass timber into their projects. And I think we got that result from the polls as well. I certainly learned a lot. If anyone in the audience has any feedback or follow up, please contact one of us on the screen, either Alex, myself, or any of the panelists and or our early adopter. The emails are there. And really all that's left for me, and I said it earlier, is to remind you that the post that we'll post the slide deck as PDF and the recording usually next day. If it's not there tomorrow, check again next on Monday, but it's usually there the next day. And again, keep an eye out for the next upcoming webinars, next subjects, or suggest one, ideally with a set of speakers, of course, and volunteering for it. And with that, I'll thank all the panelists for your amazing presentations, and we'll see you again at the next webinar. Thank you so much.
Thanks, everyone. Thank you.
Thanks.
Everyone.